We have rallied, we have marched, we have held vigils, we've held bell ringings and candle lighting services to honor victims after victims after victims after victims of devastating gun violence. We've testified. We've stood outside in freezing weather holding signs. We have lobbied. We have written emails and postcards and made phone calls. We have come just short of doing cartwheels to get the attention of our legislators. And I wouldn't mind doing that either if it was necessary. This year, though, something is different. We elected a gun sense majority. And we are confronted with and surrounded by deadly shootings every day. It's not sustainable. Our children and our communities are not safe. My sister, whose photo I wear here on my shirt, was not safe when her estranged husband shot and killed her 30 years ago. I do this for her. I do this for the many victims and survivors.
What do you remember about?
Do I remember? She was one of my favorite people, probably ever. Because, like you've described her as energetic, enthusiastic, sophisticated, pretty, beautiful. I kind of idolized her. I think she was driving.
Yeah.
We're speeding along.
She was driving.
We're speeding along the highway, from what I recall as a child. And the door flew open.
Right.
To the car.
Right.
And I think Rob was with us in the car too, but she screamed and yelled and reached over as we were speeding down the highway and closed the door.
Yeah.
And we just kept going to wherever we were going.
She was not a good driver.
Oh, no.
She was really a good pilot.
Okay.
Yes.
Not a good driver.
She was a much better pilot than she was a driver, because I know she was. I didn't like how she drove, but she was a very good pilot.
Did I ever go up in a plane
with her?
Them?
No,
with
but
her?
one
But I
time,
did go up in a plane at West Bearskin.
Yes, one time they flew, because Russ had his pilot's license and had a plane. They flew into West Bearskin when we were there.
Well, that's when I think I remember like Rob and Dario were teasing and threatening to push me out of it.
Oh, yeah, they do that.
They used to chase me around our house, pull my hair. They were like the older brothers
You didn't have. My name is Joan Peterson, and I'm here to talk about my sister, Barbara Lund. August 5th of 1992, my sister, Barbara Lund, was shot and killed by her estranged husband during a very contentious divorce. Here's a nice photo of my sister, Barbara, with your mom when she was a baby at the swimming pool at their house. Had these crazy Christmas events at her house. Let's see if I can find a picture of the whole group, where she would have her kids from her first marriage and her first husband, and Russ had his first wife there, and we had these crazy Christmases with a whole host of characters. But it was fun because everybody seemed to get along. So we have lots of pictures of those. These are obviously after her death, when we went to Aspen. Some of her ashes are on top of Aspen Mountain, and a bench was made behind the Aspen Art Institute because Barbara was an artist. And these are cairns, they're called. They're piles of rocks that are usually done in memory or to show direction to someplace. Some of the rocks came from Lake Superior, since Barbara was born in Duluth. And this is the family who went to Aspen for the memorial service for her. Here's a picture of her son Dario with his arm around my mother, Barbara's mother, on top of Aspen Mountain, where some of her ashes were spread. Oh, here's a nice picture of Barbara with Kevin, who was also shot. Kevin Kelly from Iowa. He was a lawyer. Russell Lund sat in the house for a day before anybody discovered that 2 people had been shot. He walked into the grocery store, the Lund's grocery store, one of the stores that he owned, and talked to his son, but failed to tell him that he had shot 2 people. Walked across the street to his divorce lawyer's office and put the gun down and said, "I've just killed 2 people." So on August 6th, I got the phone call that everyone dreads, that my sister had been shot and killed. This is a great picture of her when she was a young girl with her braids and with my mother. She was always there. She was always my sister from the time I was born. But the fact that she was 10 years older meant that her life was fairly different from mine. She was doing things as a teenager that as a 5-year-old it was hard for me to understand. There were times when she had some kind of wild parties at my house, and my brother and I would kind of hide away in the bedroom, not sure what we should do. But she was a loving person, she was a beautiful person, and she was adventurous. She loved to ski, she loved to downhill ski. So after she graduated from the University of Minnesota with a degree in mathematics, she went off to Aspen, Colorado, to ski, and she worked at a restaurant in Aspen. And so that was her love. I used to go and watch her at ski races. At one point she went on a ski trip, and that's where she met Russell Lund on a ski trip, and she fell in love with Russell, and eventually they got married right before my husband Alan and I got married. He had 3 children by his first marriage. As my sister's relationship became more contentious, she separated from him and kind of went her own separate way. So on August 5th, when she showed up at his house with some papers, some court papers, somehow he got she and Kevin into his home and shot and killed them. On August 6th, I got a phone call from my nephew, Dario. He told me I should sit down, and he said Barbara had been killed. When the words came out of his mouth that she had been shot by Russell Lund, it was shocking to say the least, and rather unbelievable that anything like that could happen in my family. One of the biggest concerns we had was, how are we going to tell my mother and Barbara's mother? She was at her cabin on West Bearskin Lake on the Gunflint Trail with a relative, and I told my husband Alan that I couldn't do it. I couldn't make that phone call. So he made the phone call and told my mother that her daughter had been shot and killed. My mother had lost her first husband to gun violence and now lost her daughter to gun violence. It was very hard for my mother. As you can imagine, it was a terrible shock, and it was a very public media story because of the prominence of the Lund family in the Twin Cities. We had to all be escorted in a bus to the back door of the church because there were so many press around waiting for the family, and they wanted to get pictures and photos, and we didn't want that to happen, so we sneaked in the back. The day of the funeral, I think he got out of the psych ward and his lawyer drove him by the house. He wanted to see what was going on. He wanted to know that he was in the news. It mattered to him that the story was more about him than about my sister and the terrible grief that my family had suffered. Russ's lawyers got him into the psych ward of a hospital rather than directly to jail. Yeah. And I suspect it had to do with the amount of money that he paid his very prominent lawyer. And he was permitted to return to the hospital after he went to jail for a few days. On October 31st, Halloween, he killed himself. He committed suicide by putting a plastic bag over his head. So it took a long time for me to process what had happened and to get involved. But in May of 2000, I went to the Million Mom March in Washington, D.C., and there I discovered there were 750,000 advocates and activists for gun violence prevention. It was that got me involved in the gun violence prevention movement. So we formed a chapter back in Duluth, and eventually it became a chapter called the Brady chapter, Brady United Against Gun Violence. Brady organization was named after Jim Brady, who was President Reagan's press secretary, who was shot and badly injured in an assassination attempt against Ronald Reagan in 1981. He was in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. He was shot in the head and he had no speech. But he decided to get involved. He and his wife, Sarah, started lobbying in Congress to pass a background check bill that would require gun sellers to do background checks on people who were purchasing a gun. It took them 6 years and 7 attempts before the Brady background check bill passed in 1993. So I got involved with Brady through the local chapter, and I met people from all over the country when I would go to Washington, D.C. for meetings, and eventually I was elected to the board of Brady United Against Gun Violence, where I served for about 12 years, which required 3 trips a year to Washington, D.C., where I would meet with the board of directors of Brady, and we would make decisions about how we wanted to proceed with trying to prevent and end gun violence. It was always very difficult. 2 years ago, in 2022, President Biden got the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act passed, the first major piece of legislation since 1993, when Sarah and Jim Brady got the Brady background check bill passed. I was invited to the White House and spent some time on the White House lawn with advocates from all over the country. It was very powerful, and I was just happy to be one of the people there on the scene to witness the signing of this bill. And then in 2023, after working since the year 2000 on the Minnesota legislature to pass the background check bill, finally the legislature passed a universal background check bill and a red flag law, or extreme risk protection order bill, which is used for family members who might see that a family member could be a danger to themselves or others, and guns can be temporarily removed, and a judge can decide whether or not the guns will be returned to that person. These measures will save lives. They have saved lives. 20 states now have background check laws, and a number of states have the red flag laws. But it was a struggle. It was a huge struggle to get it to happen. So as I stood in the office of Governor Walz as he signed the bill, with Gabby Giffords by his side, I had tears in my eyes because I was thinking about why it had to take 23 years, 24 years to get a bill passed in memory of my sister. It was a very emotional moment. I'm happy that I was invited to that moment as well.
In the years since the Sandy Hook shooting, so many others have joined this cause. Moms Demand Action and Giffords are in Minnesota, along with Brady and Protect Minnesota, the Jewish Women's Coalition, Pediatricians, Minnesota Medical Association, nurses, Mothers Against Community Gun Violence, Students Demand Action, March for Our Lives, Mental Health Advocates, Veterans for Peace, Grandmothers for Peace, faith communities, gun owners, PTA, teachers, and virtually the entire population of Minnesota.
My husband Alan is a gun owner. He was a hunter. We have guns that are locked safely in a gun safe. And we are encouraging people to safely store their guns because many guns used in crime are stolen. Little children find them and shoot themselves or somebody else. 70% of school shootings, the shooter gets the gun from home. But with more and more and more school shootings, which didn't happen until recently, those have increased in numbers. And because of assault type rifles, they've also, the capacity of the shooter has also increased as far as the number of people that can be shot at one time. The bullets that come from assault rifles are much more deadly than those that come from handguns. And I think that we are finally winning because the majority of Americans now are in favor of passing reasonable gun laws.
Many think that strong gun laws won't work to prevent some of our shootings. They are wrong. They work in virtually every other country in the world where shootings are not happening every day like they are here. They work in the states that have passed stronger gun laws where gun deaths are lower than in states that have not passed the laws. I will channel Governor Walz when he said last week, watch us pass sensible gun laws. Watch us, hear us, let's do this.
Child, sing the holy angels. We are holding you. You can rest. More